at least get the recording going. Didn't we have that happen before, Chris, where we went through a whole episode and I didn't hit record? I think it was one where me and you were just
No, it was
talking.
Ryan, maybe, but we also had Ryan where he talked for like 3 hours and he was like, "Well, let me know when you want to start the podcast."
Oh, right. Like, dude, we've been recording. That's how these are. It's not Channel 5 News or anything like that. So, Nathan, can you give us a little bit of a background with your experience with pigeons?
Sure. I started out when I was like really young. I think my brother and I were probably like 10, 12 years old, and we wanted to raise pigeons, and we'd found some guy that would sell us some rollers, and just me and my brother would build a loft, and we had our birds. That progressed to getting some fancy breeds, some fantails, commonerers, trumpeters, and such. I was also into like the flying racing pigeons, and growing up we didn't have very much money, but a lot of desire and whatnot. And there was a gentleman that lived down the street from us that had a really nice loft and had some really good quality racers, but he would only allow them to breed certain times a year. And to kind of fulfill our desire for some good birds, what he did was he gave us some eggs and we just fostered them with the other ones and end up with some pretty decent racers that we just would take. And we didn't actually race them. We'd take them 50 miles away, whatever, and let them go and kind of just have fun with it that way. So most of my teenage years I had pigeons. Funny thing is, and this is kind of a fun little side note, is that I currently don't have any pigeons. I haven't had any since I think I gave up my pigeons when I was about 20. So it's been 20 some odd years that I haven't actually owned the pigeons. Currently I do have parakeets. I got an aviary full of parakeets, and I want to try and get back into some diamond doves or something that might be compatible with the parakeets. I just don't have a space, and there's some restrictions in my neighborhood.
So I was curious about this. We got your calendar the first time last year, and I'm always looking at these pigeons, and I'm always curious, where do you get these pigeons that are in those calendars you make?
A lot of the photography work, I go to the pigeon shows. When I first started doing a calendar, I got so much grief from certain people in the pigeon fancier circles that like, oh, this isn't show quality, or that one's a lousy spec. So all the hate that comes with, you just can't please everybody. But I felt like, okay, well then what made the most sense to me was to go to pigeon shows, because people are going to generally bring the best of what they've got there, and then be able to photograph them at the shows. Just like go up to the people like, hey, I'd like to photograph your bird and whatnot. And when I first got started, I think people are just kind of like looking at me like, are you, what are you going to charge me? I'm like, I'm just trying to build up a portfolio of pigeon breeds. I mean, I've always had a passion for birds and the pigeons and such, but it was just a matter of like, okay, how do I do this? And kind of the genesis of it, like when I had pigeons when I was a teenager, I'd set up and I do certain photography things at home with them, and kind of the style has just kind of evolved from what I started doing then. I felt like I could take advantage of the shows, get a wide variety of breeds, and be able to talk to people and whatnot. And when they realized that I'm not there to charge them money to take the picture of the birds, and I'm happy to share digital copy of their birds, for them to promote their birds or whatever as a side thing. I've had a lot of people take me up on the offer to take pictures of their birds. So, and it's always fun. It gets a little bit hard sometimes at the show to track down who the owner is, but I'll take a picture of the tag and talk to some of my contacts there and be like, do you know who this guy is, or do you know how to get a hold of them and get permission to take their birds out of the cages and go and take the pictures. What I used to do when I was younger and I was taking the pictures, I just set up like some poster boards and tried to do a flash. And I got thinking about it when I decided to get back into it, which that's a quick story there. I tore my meniscus. I was off of work for a period of time, and I just sat there and I was like looking around Instagram, and it was like, thinking back on my childhood and looking at pigeons, and I was looking at the pictures on Instagram, and I was like, there's a handful of people there that I felt like they knew what they were doing with the, taking the pictures of them, from a photographic background. But I thought, this is something I could do. And then I thought, well, what if I did a calendar? So that was kind of the genesis, was just looking through Instagram and seeing, what pictures were popular and, what breeds, and kind of doing some research that way. And then I just reached out to local pigeon, the Utah Facebook pigeon group. And I said, hey, I'm interested in taking pictures of birds. And I got zero response the first time around. And then about a month or so later, I tried it again. And that's when I got Max Long, who does a lot of Indian fantails and West of England. I'm trying to think, and he had some trumpeters. He's like, yeah, come on over to my house. So I went over to his house, and that was my first official shoot with it. And I'd built like a light box, or a shadow box, out of PVC pipes, like an old white bed sheet. My mom helped me, I was like, she used to be a seamstress. And I said, hey, this is what I want to do. So she helped me, convert a bed sheet into a cover for this PVC skeleton that I'd created. And then I bought some PVC liner sheets. And that's how I get that solid white background or the solid black background.
That's one of those things I was going to ask you about, that because it's totally seamless, and you don't even see like an angle or anything like that. It looks super clean. And I put up a little for my pigeon area where I have my show cages. I got white MDF board on the top, bottom, and back, but you can clearly see, the corners and stuff like that. So that's interesting. That's another thing I was curious about. If you're going around the show and you say, can I take a picture of your bird? So that was your portable setup then, huh? That you would pull the bird out, set him in there, and do the photo shoot then.
Right. And then what I did was, my wife bought she'd got me like the screen pavilion one year for Father's Day, and I kind of looked at it and I thought, well, that'll be fun for some picnics. But it's actually turned out pretty. There's been a few times when I've been at the show and they've actually got like a side room that I can set my stuff up in.
Oh, okay.
But having the screen pavilion, I can even set it up outdoors and just run an extension cord out to take the pictures. And then if the birds slip out of my box for whatever reason, they're not gonna get away. I did have one mishap, and I made sure ever since then that I secure that thing. A gust of wind came up and just blew the screen tent that I had up, and just the first thing I did was grab that pigeon and just like, okay, man. People are trusting me with their their prized birds.
Yeah.
Last thing I want to do is be that guy that mess things up. So grabbed the bird and hurried and put it up, and then had to come back and try and figure out how to get all my stuff back together. Yeah, so I just have like this screen tent that I set up, and then I run that in. Now, if another technical thing about the box, the nice thing about the box is I can put a light above it, and it kind of diffuses that light, so you don't end up with like a lot of harsh shadows. That's one of the things, if you want to talk about like the technical end of it. Looking at what I'd seen online, and I was like, I didn't like any lines on it, because I felt like, even back when I was in high school and I did some of these pictures, I'll have to share some with you later. I did the black because it was easy to hide the lines on the black. That was back in the day. I was shooting with black and white film on a fully manual Minolta camera my dad would let me play around with, and it worked really good for that. But it was technically a lot harder because I didn't have the fancy light meters and stuff like that, so I had to calculate what settings I had to put on that camera to get the correct exposure and balance it. So, and it was definitely, the other thing that made it really difficult is unlike digital, you pull out your phone, you pull out even any of the cameras now, within 2 seconds if you got the picture you want. And I was taking the pictures, and I had to be stingy with it. I'm like, you look back on it now, and when I shoot and film it, by the time you included the cost of the film, the developing stuff, you're between 50 cents to $1 per print, to develop it and everything else, versus digital now, where it's shoot as many as you can, get the right picture and delete the rest, or be a digital pack rat. Like, my wife's like, well, why don't you label everything? And I'm like, well, that take too much time. I just go through and I select the ones I want and work from there, and there's, can't tell you how many hard drives and whatnot I've filled up over the years. I treat my SD cards like I would like the old negatives. Like, I don't like to write over them and whatnot, because heaven forbid I have a catastrophic failure of my hard drive or whatever. I want, a backup.
Yeah.
So I usually try to do like a triple backup. I upload it to Google Photos, save it on my hard drive. I got an external hard drive, and I've got the SD cards that keep track of it.
Hello and welcome to the All About Pigeons podcast. I'm Phil.
I'm Chris.
And we have with us photographer Nate Abbott. He does all kinds of photography, plants, fish, reptiles, but also pigeons. He also has a pigeon calendar that he makes every year that's got really good variety of breeds, real high quality images. You can find a lot of his stuff. I found a lot of your stuff just by Googling Nate Abbott, but he also has an Instagram, Nate's Pigeon Portraits. You can look at a lot of his work there. And we all love our birds. We all take tons of pictures of them. When I go to when I was just at the pigeon show that we just had the other weekend, I was asking people about the birds, and they whip out their phone, and everyone's got like a folder of just pictures of their pigeons. So whether it's showing your friends at the show or mainly social media, a lot of people, especially guys working on colors and stuff like that, or rare breeds, like putting pictures up there. And I know we're using a phone, and you're a professional photographer using high-end equipment and stuff, but what kind of tips can you give the listeners about get that best picture that you can with a phone? I mean, I know right now, like we were saying earlier, we'll take a whole bunch of pictures, kind of pick the best one. Like I said, I built a little show pin, and I put white MDF board on all three sides, but it still was looking kind of weird. Could you kind of go back real quick and describe how you made that frame and the blanket setup? I mean, that'd be kind of a cool thing to have just for throwing a bird in for a picture every now and then.
Yeah. So what it is, I build a box, and it's about like 2 foot each direction out of PVC. So you got your corners. It comes down. The front of it is not connected, because I want that roll or that plastic that I use to do the backdrop and the bottom of it to smooth and not have anything interfering, so I can get a lower shot without having a pull in the way. I use the white fabric so that you don't have anything that's going to discolor the overall shot. The other thing that's really helpful, like you said, you use the MDF. Buy like PVC sheets that they're used for photography. It's like a 2 foot by 4 foot. So basically it'll cover that the back to and the floor of that. And I use just some plastic clips. You can get them at Walmart or whatever to hold that thing in place once it's up. And the reason why I like the PVC is because I guarantee you, every time you pick up a bird and you put it in there, the first thing it's going to do is going to take a dump on it. And so you need something you can wipe it up very quickly. I would say about 80-90% of the birds, I don't know, it's just a reflex or whatever, they're not going to poop on you while you're carrying them, but the second they feel like they can relax, they're going to let it go almost every time. So it's like, yeah, I gotta have this. And I like to use the black or the white. Colors are optional. I know there's a really good other photographer who does a lot of NPA stuff, and he does all the shows here officially. You may have heard of him. His name is Lane Gardner.
Yeah.
He does a really good job with the pictures, and there's kind of I don't know how to describe it. Like, he has his style, and he's looking for wanting to have that kind of like the breed standard. Like if you look at the line drawings they do of the breed standards, that's basically how he executes his shots. I'm looking more for personality, and some people like, oh, I don't like that shot because it does this, and I'm like looking at it. Like I said, there's always going to be that hater that doesn't, oh, that's not a perfect bird, or, oh, you should do it like Lane does. And I'm like, well, there are two different people who got two different approaches. I look up to his stuff. He's a great guy, but that's not what I'm trying to execute. So I'm like, okay, well, just let it slide off your back.
Yeah, that one you did with the Figurita and the Polish lynx is pretty cool.
So I don't know if you've ever met Terry. He's out of California. He's always showing at the show. He wasn't there at the last show I went to. He had met like surgery or whatever. He's been one of my big supporters, and that shot was actually his idea. I've been like really big on just doing, single birds. He's like, I really want to, show off the difference and those were both his birds. And he's like, I really want to show off the, the difference in sizes of these. In my mind, like I totally agree with Figurita. If I could have found a runt, a giant runt pigeon to take a picture of with it, to me, that would have been, like the ultimate, like Great Dane versus Chihuahua kind of shot.
Right.
For size comparison of pigeons. I mean, people don't realize that there's that much of a size difference in the pigeons. But yeah, he wanted me to do that. He brought the birds over, and I'm like, okay, let's try this. And I've done some experimentation with multiple birds in the shots since then, and I'm like, okay, that's something I needed to do more of. Like I missed an opportunity. Like I did some Indian fantails that belonged to Max Long, a black one and a white one together.
Yeah.
And that turned out really good too. It does create all new layers of chaos because like sometimes you get a bird in there and they've got a mind of their own. I'd say some of the most difficult breeds to photograph are archangels. I don't know if you're familiar with that breed.
Yeah, I used to have some there, kind of wild, kind of flighty.
They're extremely, they don't want to hold still. And the other one, and I think it's kind of an intelligence thing or an inquisitiveness, but Oriental rollers always want to just kind of work their way up to the front, and where you can't take a picture of them. They're like just sitting there looking like, hey, what are you doing? Or they're a little more inquisitive breed than the others. That's kind of a little side thing, but it's still kind of interesting that there are definitely some personalities in the genetics of the various breeds.
Right.
When you're photographing these birds, do you use anything to get them to pose? One guy, he uses a feather on a stick.
I know Lane uses something that looks like either a I know Lane is former music teacher, so I think he uses something like a conductor's kind of stick or something to try and get him, because he one of the things that Lane, I had a chance to talk to him at the last show, and he was like giving me pointers on how he takes pictures of the birds. But one of the things I didn't realize was it's a very big deal to him. It's not necessarily a big deal to me, although I think that it does make for a sharper looking one. Is he's like, don't let the tail feathers hit the ground. You want them to be in the air. And I'm like, obviously if it's a fantail, that's going to be something to be aware of. But he's like, that's kind of his, like, what makes a great picture to one of the elements that makes a great picture to him.
This guy here uses a little block for them to stand on, and he's taking pictures of racing pigeons for one loft racing.
Yeah, I've seen guys do that. Yeah, the block thing where they put them up on a block and take their picture.
That's Ryan from
Ryan. Yeah.
And he photographs all those birds in a white box.
Yeah, I was going to say, I have noticed, I've kind of been thinking about my strategy, and it works, 70, 80% of the time with the birds I'm photographing. But I can say that one advantage to, having a piece of wood or something like that would be better than the way I do it is that there seems to be some breeds are really sensitive to the tactile, like that really smooth plastic. It's hard to get a good Indian fantail shot. And some of the muffed breeds don't know, it's like, I think that they react to that surface. Like they think they're just going to slide off of it. And so they'll hunker down and they won't stand up straight. And, or if you wanted to control where the bird is going to stand, I mean, they're going to obviously feel more comfortable on a piece of wood than this unnatural plastic.
So if you're just in your loft with your birds and your cell phone, so they're going to be on a perch, they're going to be, and also light is kind of a weird thing too. What are some pointers you can give the listeners for that when they're just in their loft trying to get a good picture?
Well, there's several things that I would say. If you're in the loft and you just want good pictures, make sure you put them in a place with no distracting elements in the background. Make sure, like if you got like a perch or something that you can have like a solid, non-distracting background is probably the biggest thing. Always make sure that the bird is looking at you, or that you have a a full view of at least one of the eyes, is, you know, you're not getting like this a weird look. I'm really big on making sure, no matter what position they're in or whatever, that anything I put out, you know, with rare exception, I want to see the eye, because I feel like that's what gives my pictures like the personality, is just that eye. And sometimes, you know, you catch a mid blink or whatever. As far as the lighting, a lot of cell phones are really good at compensating for the light and adjusting. You know, if you've got like artificial light in there, sometimes it'll read that as like a yellowish light, you know, if it's an incandescent or whatever. So you'll need to go into your camera settings, and a lot of times it'll allow you to adjust for different types of light, even in the cell phones. You just have to know where to look in your phone to adjust that light. But the biggest thing I'd say is just making sure you get as close as you can to get as much of the bird in there, and eliminate anything that's distracting in the background. Unless I've seen there's some people that, you know, they've got really fancy gardens and they let their birds out, and I'm just like, that would be a dream right there, to, you know, have a yard and be able to add, you know, things in the background that enhance it and not just distract from it.
My least favorite thing in any photo is wire.
Oh yeah. A lot of the, you know, there's a lot of people that if you've got wood, it looks good, but yeah, wire never, you know, gives you that, you know, warm fuzzy feeling, does it?
Yeah, and even when we're at like shows trying to take a picture, I'll try to put the camera really close to the cage so the wires are on each side of the lens, but still, you know, you got wire all over the background, and yeah, it's a show cage.
I personally use a product called ACDC. But there's, I think even Canva, there's like some photo editing or whatever programs you can use. The AI is getting really good at just being able to cut that background out.
Oh yeah.
And clean it up. And that's, you know, like when I'm editing the pictures, sometimes some more poop happens in between the shot, and I can photo edit that out. I don't feel like that's being disingenuous, but I try to, you know, cut that work time down as much as I possibly can by just making sure I get the best shot, get it as perfect as I can beforehand.
I even tried setting up a little area in my my one breeder loft where it's got a white panel in the background, and it's, you know, I'm like, I'll just use this area to put a bird for a second before they hop and fly away and try to get their picture. But that area, it's in my breeder loft, so it's got poop all over it, you know, immediately.
Yeah.
And I was like, I want to put a little piece of painted green, do a green screen, and then start taking pictures of my birds with some crazy backgrounds. But it never happened because it just sits in my breeder loft and it gets covered really fast.
I was going to mention, you know, when I started doing the calendars, the first year plus, I had an entry level digital SLR, a Nikon one, and I've been looking, like my nephew and my niece wanted, you know, cameras, and so my sister came to me and she's like, you know, what should I get them? And I was able to find the lens and the camera, you know, together for under $200. So it's not, you don't need super fancy stuff. I was going to mention one thing about the lighting. I started out using flash, but without having a big expensive plug-in type flash system. The time that it takes for a flash to charge up between shots was something I didn't like to deal with, because I want to take a bunch of pictures really quickly. And so that flash doesn't charge up very quickly. And so I just went for LED lights. The one problem I had with the LED light, I bought like a 100-watt equivalent floodlight on Amazon. It was like $20 or whatever. But I found that like once I got over 1/100th of a second on my shutter speed, I'd start to get these black or like grayer bands in my picture. And I have a nephew that's really into the technical end of it. And I was like, why is it doing that? He's like, well, because it's an AC LED and it'll like leave literal bars in your picture just because how that camera is seeing that light, you know. I don't know if you've ever been outside under LED lights and it's snowing, but the snowflakes fall differently than they, you know, it would if you otherwise, because of that AC power supply on it. So I switched it. He got me some DC LED lights they've currently been using, and so I don't have whatever shutter speed I want. It doesn't really have to be that expensive of a setup. You can get, here's the ironic thing, was the lens that I ended up, my current favorite lens is an old film lens from a Nikon film camera. And I married that to a professional level, but older Nikon camera that you could buy this camera body for about $100. So $100 for the camera body, and then $35 for this old film lens that was like an off-brand one, but still made in Japan. So it's got really good optics on it. And that's kind of been my go-to because I need to be able to get close enough to the birds. I tried to buy a nicer Nikon branded lens that I thought was going to up my game, but it wouldn't allow me to focus close enough to get the birds, from the way my setup was. And so I'm like, okay, so this $35 lens and a $100 camera body is what I'm using.
I got a camera that I can take better pictures with my iPhone, but it's got all the goodies, but I never had any luck with it. It's a Nikon as well.
What year or what model is it?
Oh, I have to look here in the back.
Yeah, we have a member of our club who does photography, and he came out to the show we had at our place, and he took some pretty cool pictures of the birds flying in the air, and those came out really cool. I still have it on the background of my phone.
The D3400.
Okay, so the original one that I started doing it was the 3000. So yours is like 2 or 3 generations after that one, the entry level one. So yours would do like video and stuff like that. Currently, I'm using a D300 and a D600. The 300, the advantage to that one, even though you can get them cheaper, is it's a pro level one. So Nikon made it so you could use these old lenses, so you can buy, secondhand lenses for film cameras that nobody's using anymore. That's how I was able to get that lens for $35.
Right. Yeah, you can get the Nikkor lenses. The only thing that I had trouble with was the any auto focus.
Mm-hmm.
That never worked.
A lot of those cameras, with the Nikon ones, I've got them stripped down so that I take it down to one focal point, and I always make sure that I'm using that focus point where the eye is, so that I always get that eye as crisp as possible. Because a lot of them will do like a general focus where they'll do multi-point or whatever. But I take a look at the picture, or the kind of how that pigeon's wanting to pose, and I dial it. You can use it. It's got like a little cursor button on the thing, so you can change it so that focus is in that area where I want the eye to be in focus.
And it's always better to just be closer, which is kind of hard with pigeons, than it is to take a picture and zoom in on it.
If you want to get like feather details and stuff like that, yeah. The other point that I would make is, like you were talking about the photographer that was doing the flying pictures, and I've done a few times where I've done flying pictures. I think last year was I put in a flying picture of a damascene pigeon, and the main thing with that is making sure you've got a shutter speed that will stop the wing action. So you need to do something in like the 1/2000th of a second range or higher, and that kind of can become a little more difficult if your light isn't strong enough. But usually if you're shooting in midday, you can make that happen. You may have to change other settings on there to change your ISO. And I don't know if you're familiar with ISO. ISO is just basically a measure of light sensitivity. So you want your ISO on whatever camera you're using as low as possible. Most of the time I'm shooting in the 200 ISO range, just so that you can get as much detail and everything else. And when I'm editing those pictures, I usually will shoot what they call RAW, which is an uncompressed format, so that you can make adjustments later. Most of your cameras that they have on the phones and stuff like that, I don't know of any of those that will shoot in RAW, but it's usually not necessary.
Yeah, they definitely have just so many settings now for cameras and all the different settings you can do with your phone. I mean, you can do pretty good pictures. You got to kind of learn your phone a little bit, but yeah, the other side of it would just be like some of the stuff you're talking about, moving that point so it's focused on the eye, getting as close as you can, keeping the lighting good. I remember we did a photo shoot down in Tucson, and the guy kept saying, you know, I want everyone to face the sun, and we're all just like squinting, and our eyes are watering and stuff. And all right, just keep your eyes closed. I'll count to 3, then open your eyes, and we'll take a picture. And I mean, I'm sure the lighting was good, dude, but all of our faces just looked absolutely ridiculous. You know, we're all about like in tears, just staring into the sun, trying to, you know, he's trying to use that natural light, I guess. And it was rough.
Yeah, I tell you, it's like I get asked all the time, you know, my family members to do like family pictures and stuff, and I was just like, I will do it most of the time, but there's some, like, I don't want my niece wanted me to do her wedding, and I was like, I really don't want to do that because it's a lot of pressure. I mean, like a pigeon's not going to say, why'd you make me look fat, you know, or
I don't know, you got those fanciers upset
you
at you for not getting the best pigeons.
Sometimes you get pictures, like I see comments, you know, sometimes online where it's like, why'd you pick that? That's not a good bird. And I'm just like, you know, there's times when I want to just get on there and say, like, you know, why I don't see any pictures that you've posted, you know.
Right. Hey, just go take some pictures of some ferals, man. That'll get them quiet.
You know, that's the funny thing with the Facebook page. I asked my followers, you know, like what they want to see more of, and a lot of them are they want to see more ferals. So
yeah,
who knows? I say, you know, there's part of me that, you know, every day when I drive to work, there's like this overpass, and there's always tons of birds underneath there. And I thought, you know, I'll just go there during one of my lunch breaks and just totally unwind, you know.
Yeah,
taking pictures of ferals.
Yeah, well, you know, I mean, like what in Italy and stuff like that, where they got like, you know, hundreds of pigeons in the square and stuff. Those are always real popular pictures.
Yeah,
they're all ferals.
And you know, the interesting part of my interest in the pigeon space is kind of like that whole what they've been able to do as far as breeding them and all the variety and stuff like that. You know, like a very interesting thing. I've thought about doing goldfish the same way, just because there's so much variety and things that they've done in the breeding.
Have you ever thought about doing, I've even seen snap-on ones that go on your phone for eye sign, where they'll put a snap-on magnifier on your camera lens for your phone, and you can get like this incredible zoomed in picture of the pigeon's eye and just see all the depth that's in there. You ever seen those pictures?
Yeah, I've seen those, and I've done some research on that, and it's kind of interesting. You know, like there's definitely enough people that believe in the eye sign to the point that, you know, they will pay a certain dollar amount for ones that have eyes that look certain. And I had no idea, but I guess there's something to it where they can look at it and they can say, oh, this one's going to be a good long distance or short distance, or
right, yeah,
you know.
And we're going to be doing an interview with David Ottaway, who's like an eye sign expert, and he's going to lay it out for us. But you see that they'll take a picture of the racing pigeon, and then, you know, in that picture in the corner somewhere will be a picture of their eye. Because that's a part people really do look at.
Yeah, especially, I mean, that can be as important to some of those the serious racers as the actual genetics.
Some of those are really, you know, they're really beautiful, the colors and everything.
I got a new eyepiece for looking at that stuff. I'm gonna look at it like a jeweler, baby.
Monopoly man.
Yep.
Little monocle.
Yeah, I got one, man. The old man gave it to me last time I was out to see him.
Really? Is that what he used it for?
Yeah, he's into that. He thinks that's where it's at.
Yeah, a lot of people do for a long time. I mean, that's the side of it. So yeah, we're gonna be talking with him on our next one, but we're up against the clock on this. So I want to thank you, Nathan, for coming on. This has been pretty cool. I really want to see all these listeners posting just next level pictures of their pigeons all over the social media and everything else. And you can always check out Nathan's got an Instagram, so that Instagram is at Nate's Pigeon Portraits. And we're going to post his links. We got some of his links posted right now on our Facebook. We'll post the other links for his calendar too, which I love your calendar, man. It's always fun every month. I don't, when I first get the calendar, I flip it over, I look at all the breeds, and then after that, I don't look at it again. So that way I'm kind of surprised every month to see what's coming up around the bend. So really enjoy the calendars, man. Keep that work up. And
just so you know, right now I did put them on the Etsy store for 30% off to try and clean up the current stock on that.
Yeah, well, this is the time of the year, first of the year.
10 or so left.
We'll get on them then.
How much is the calendar?
They're 30% off, so I think it ends up being, and the shipping's included, it'd be about 15. But if you want to reach out to me directly, if I don't have to go through Etsy, I can give you a better deal. So just look up, if anybody wants to look up the email address and whatnot, I could probably get them sent out for about $12. if you go directly to me.
Look at that, $1 a month.
$1 a month. You got a subscription.
And I've got limited supply on them, but that's where it's at. The other thing is, if you have any questions, technical or whatever, just feel free to, put my email address on there, and I'll try and answer those as quick as I can.
Yeah, we'll definitely do that. We'll share that with everybody, and they can reach out to you. That would be great.
Very cool. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Nathan.
Yep. Have a good one.